In today's show, Tony Schick of Oregon Public Broadcasting joins the program to talk about his story on Tom Dundon, how Dundon built his wealth, and Dundon's sordid history with the state of Oregon. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to a bonus episode of Locked On Blazers. We're going to talk the future owner of the Trailblazers, Tom Dundon, and how he built his wealth and how building that wealth ran afoul of the state of Oregon, among other places. And joining me to do that is going to be Tony Schick of Oregon Public Broadcasting, who wrote a great feature that published last week about Dundon and sort of the beginning of Dundon's empire as a very wealthy person and soon to be an owner of an NBA franchise right here in Portland. You know, the Trailblazers. So without further ado, let's get into it. Joining me now, Tony Schick of OPB, who's done some excellent reporting on how future Trailblazers owner Tom Dundon built his wealth. I say that with a question mark because it's not officially official. And I would say that Tom Dundon and the wholesale process keeps getting a little bit trickier than you might want it to be. Tony, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
I know you are a Blazers fan of sorts, but you also did some really good reporting. So as much as, we talked off mic about Shaedon Sharpe and our hopes for the Blazers season, I want to focus today on a story you recently wrote on OPB that is linked in the episode description below. So my listeners should definitely go read it because it's just wonderful journalism. It detailed how Tom Dundon built his fortune. The best way to get $1 billion is to start with 700 million. Tony, how did Tom Dundon build his fortune? Where did that $700 million come from?
Yeah, that $700 million came from a separation agreement, mostly stock from a company called Santander Consumer, which is a subprime auto lender, which is where, and he had a pretty good amount of money before that from the company because, excuse me, he was at CEO and he was, pulling in tens of millions of dollars a year from that. He also had a significant loan from the company that I'm not sure what he was doing with, but he had access to almost $300 million in capital from that loan. But short answer to your question is $700 million came from him leaving Santander Consumer in the midst of a lot of scrutiny on the company.
So what is this scrutiny? And it also involves, a major lawsuit from the state of Oregon. Where did the scrutiny start? Like, take us to the sort of the early genesis of the subprime auto loan world that kind of got a little messy here.
Yeah. So in the late 90s, Dundon and some other folks from car dealership financing in Dallas start a company that becomes known as Drive Financial, and they are a subprime auto lender. They're lending, they kind of make their business lending to people that no other lenders will touch. And that's kind of what they advertise as, like, we can overlook bankruptcies, charge-offs, all sorts of things like that. And they build a pretty good sized business that eventually gets acquired by Santander, which is a Spanish bank. When they want to break into the market in the US, they just buy Drive Financial. And at this time, a lot of people cash out. Dundon stays on, says, I'm going to keep 10% stake in this company, and he becomes the CEO. He was already the president and COO of the previous company, but he becomes CEO. He's got a seat on the board of directors, and he's got a 10% stake in the company as one of its founders. So he is like the driving force of Santander Consumer. And in the time after it was acquired by Santander, up to about 2015 when he leaves, it becomes the biggest subprime auto lender in the country. Its value jumps from about $630 million at the time that it's purchased in 2006 up to let me check my notes, almost $9 billion by the time that he leaves. And pretty much all of that lending is done through all of that growth is done through like deep subprime lending and a lot of high interest loans to people who are high risk borrowers. And then
go ahead. Sorry.
And to get into the scrutiny, that's kind of all the setup for when the scrutiny happens. But
yeah, okay. So this is, they've made a ton of money. This is sort of the era of subprime loaning in general. It's not too dissimilar from the housing bubble that caused the collapse in 2008. This is the same sort of like giving people who otherwise would not have access to loans that they just cannot. They don't have a path to pay off. And some of that predatory nature of these loans is that you make more money when people default. It is the knowledge that people cannot pay off these loans, right? So this is, I don't know, this isn't that uncommon of a business practice in the United States of America.
No, it's not even that uncommon amongst MBA owners. Actually.
Yeah. I would say this is for like, maybe this is a little cynical of me, but like fairly standard stuff. How'd you make $1 billion? Well, I got to guess. But how did this practice that is relatively common run afoul of the state of Oregon? Like how did sort of the legal troubles come up here?
Yeah. So, and I will say like subprime lending there's a lot of people who kind of think of it and think like that's pretty icky. We talked to some like experts in finance who said that like it's not inherently necessarily problematic because there are high risk borrowers who need loans and so like the practice itself can be done responsibly.
Right. It's a path for someone who, in this case, who doesn't have a car to get a car. If you have no other way to get financing to get a motor vehicle, you live in a community or an area where there is no other path to employment that doesn't involve a motor vehicle. That is the idea of a high risk loan would be to allow you to get to work to like, and I think the same thing with the housing market in general. It's if you had no other path to home ownership, a subprime loan and these high risk loans, this is your path. So I do understand that there is a world in which this is a way out for folks, that this is actually a ladder out.
Yes. But even when everyone's behaving the way they should and kind of meeting regulations, you're going to have a steady stream of bad things happening because it's such high risk. And there's also a lot of opportunity for taking advantage of people or extracting more profit, because if you desperately need a car, I can charge a rate that might be a bit higher than it normally would be because you're desperate for that car. So how Santander started to get in trouble with regulators was they were knowingly, according to the allegation from Oregon and 34 other states, the company was kind of knowingly writing loans to high interest or to high risk people that were at high risk of default. So they had sophisticated ways of knowing that these people were very likely to default and not be able to pay their loans, and they were loaning to them anyway. And there were also issues with disclosures and kind of misleading practices and a kind of blind eye being turned to dealer practices, according to the complaint from the states. All of this being done in an effort to claim a bigger share of the market, like a relentless pursuit of the market. They're overlooking problems from dealers while also issuing a lot of problematic loans. So Oregon is actually ahead of a lot of other states in looking at Santander. One thing that surprised us was that Oregon, so a bunch of states sue Santander, and there's a big settlement in 2020. But Oregon, actually, all the way back in 2012, we got records from the Attorney General that they had sent an investigative demand letter to Tom Dundon saying, you need to show up here and testify or provide us documents about these 24 borrowers because we have serious concerns about what's happening with these borrowers. That resulted in what's called a assurance of voluntary compliance, which is a fancy way of saying a settlement, where Santander agreed to pay the state $25,000 and take steps to protect consumers. But the regulatory scrutiny did not stop there. Pretty shortly after that, Oregon and 34 other attorneys general began investigating the company in 2014 over a lot of these practices that I was just describing. Mm-hmm. And I might need to look at the story real quick because there's so many different investigations that happened at this time that it's hard to keep track. But there was a subpoena from the U.S. Department of Justice that resulted in a settlement over the company illegally repossessing cars from service members. So a violation of the Civil Service Members Act, which is, if you're like serving our country in the military, you shouldn't get your car repossessed. That's essentially what that law is for. So there's a settlement for illegally repossessing service members' cars. There was a settlement with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for what was termed deceptive acts and not disclosing, all of the kind of pros and cons of certain loan products. They were also doing this thing where they would grant people extensions on their loans. So if you couldn't make a payment, they'd say, oh, you can skip it. You can just skip that. But what was happening was that payment was getting moved to the end of the loan, and so much interest was accruing on those that it was just burying borrowers in the interest. And so regulators came down on them for that. And then in the midst of all of that, the Federal Reserve, which regulates banks, also came down hard on Santander, saying, basically, you failed our stress test. We've got all these deficiencies in your company. You have to sign this consent order saying you're going to file these written reports about how you're going to improve your company, oversight, all of these things. They signed that agreement in late June of 2015. It takes effect on July 2nd, 2015, which is the same day that Tom Dundon steps down as CEO. Dundon didn't answer any questions for our reporting. He did, in a 2015 interview with the Dallas Morning News, say that that particular Federal Reserve issue didn't involve him, which I'm very confused about, given that it was targeting a company that he was CEO of at the time. But that is what he said at the time. So the timing is essentially that he leaves that company in the midst of all of this scrutiny, like all these investigations start, and then he steps down with essentially $713 million richer eventually.
Yeah, he cashes in his stock, right, and gets he's like he gets out just as it was kind of getting a little bit dicier for them. So this is relatively recent history, right? Like, this isn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things. You would assume that Oregon politicians, to some extent, were aware of this, and yet this is a man who's been had a large lawsuit with him in the state of Oregon, and now when he is signing up to become the owner of the crown jewel of our city to some extent, because Nike's never coming into the city limits, but like because the most valuable asset in the city, largely celebrated in a lot of ways. I get it. He's probably going to keep the team here and all of these things, but my question to you is, do have any public figures in Oregon acknowledged their sort of somewhat sordid relationship with this man who's going to be one of the most powerful figures in the state here in 7 months or something like that.
Nope.
First, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. You're going to love Peloton IQ because it's got a system that offers real-time strength coaching. It actually is going to track your reps, suggests the right weights, and correct your form along the way, making every rep safer and smarter. Plus, the swivel screen is a game changer. So you can go from running on that Tread Plus, flip that thing around, hop on your mat, and move on to strength training without missing a beat. And the personalized class recommendations keep you engaged, so you get workouts tailored to your vibe and energy level each and every week. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Plus Tread today at onepeloton.com. All right. Here's the rest of my conversation with Tony Schick of Oregon Public Broadcasting. Have any public figures in Oregon acknowledged their sort of somewhat sordid relationship with this man who's going to be one of the most powerful figures in the state here in 7 months or something like that?
Nope.
Why not? Why would they not do it? You don't need maybe to get into deep your opinion, but to like, why have they just declined? What is going on there?
Yeah. So we asked, the people we asked specifically were Keith Wilson, the mayor of Portland, and Tina Kotek, the governor, because they were the ones who penned a letter to the NBA commissioner saying, like, we're going to partner with whoever the new owner is, public-private partnership. We're in on this. Wilson spokesperson, we sent them an overview of the story and some questions. They said, we'll decline comment at this time, or decline an interview. And I said, well, can you at least answer the questions in writing if you're not going to do an interview? And they said, no. Kotek spokesperson at one point said that they were going to provide a response to us. They didn't provide a response to us by the time that they said they would, which was a couple Fridays ago. And then right after that, the president of the United States announced that he was going to send the National Guard into Portland. And
got a little different. Things got a little more.
Leaders got a little preoccupied, and so it was a little more puzzling to me why we didn't get a response before that. But once that happened, it was like, all right, we're not going to hear back from him now.
Right.
So
yeah. Now it's not the time to press them on the basketball. Hey, what about the basketball team? I joked with a mutual friend of ours, who's a colleague of yours at Oregon Public Broadcasting. And I said, if Tony can't get on the show because basketball is not super important in your newsroom right now, I totally understand. But I do appreciate the time. I wonder this. Is there any world in which this situation, sort of Dundon's relationship with Oregon, interrupts the sale? Could you anticipate anything of that magnitude?
I don't. I mean,
yeah,
I would be surprised. It would have to be something like the Board of Governors of the NBA took issue with, right? Or the Allen estate all of a sudden is like, oh, we don't want to be in business with these guys. I would hope that if they're doing a $4 billion deal, they're not waiting for my story, that they're like doing some digging, like that they knew, this.
Yeah.
So, but then the other thing is, like, we said this a little bit ago, but like, this does not really, like, these allegations of predatory lending don't really stand out amongst NBA owners. Like, we've had, Donald Sterling as an NBA owner. There was a Russian oligarch as an NBA owner. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I would say, yeah, I would say in general, this is not outside of the realm for like just sort of generally speaking how wealthy people make money in America. He probably did it he was really good at it, I'll say. Like from what I gather, him and his friends all started this company. Some of them cashed out. He waited and made $700 million. So maybe he was just he had a better sense of where it was all going. This is like and then the other thing I want to point out here, and this is mentioned many times in the OPB story. In the lawsuits from your reporting, there's never an admission of guilt. Is that correct? Do I have that correct? There is never in any of the settlements an admission of guilt. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, that's correct, and that's fairly standard for a lot of settlements, but
I think that's it. I think that's it. He didn't do anything wrong. At no point has Tom Dundon admitted any wrongdoing. This is not only par for the course for like sort of the general type of person that might be able to buy an NBA team, but in the legal world, he can say factually,
he can point to those and say,
factually say none of this has risen to the level of being a crime.
Right.
Look at the legal settlement. So I wonder, I kind of think that's to me, from my outsider's perspective, this has no impact on the sale. This is mostly just color about what we're learning about the type of people that can afford to buy a team and the type of person that will be a major figure in Portland. Fingers crossed, I guess, a major figure in Portland for some time. I wonder this, and I'll let you get out of here because again, I think there are more pressing things, unfortunately, happening in our state than the basketball team. But I make a show about a basketball team every day, so I appreciate the time. How did this get on your radar?
I devote a lot of my life to this basketball team, so
that's why I got you on, Tony. I knew in your heart that it was that hoops were calling you, even if there was some less fun stuff that was coming across your desk literally every second. How did the story get on your radar? Like, how did you guys start reporting this and with ProPublica and all that? Like, how did this sort of come into your newsroom and into your desk?
Yeah, I think we started on it the way a lot of folks started on it was just like looking at okay, here's a guy who purchased the Trailblazers. What can we know about him? What does his business history maybe portend for the Blazers? I worked on a story that we ran pretty soon after the sale was announced. It was just like, who is this guy? And it didn't get into any of this stuff. It was mostly about like his Carolina Hurricanes ownership. He invested in Topgolf, these kinds of things. And I will say, I think the first person I heard mention subprime loans in connection with him was you on one of your very early shows. And
when I Googled him, I said, oh, he got rich on subprime loans, but I didn't do any journalism. I'm mostly a hobbyist podcaster. So I was like, okay, he got rich on subprime loans. That doesn't seem that cool. That's not a cool thing to get rich doing.
So I did file that away. Well, you say it's not a cool thing to get rich doing. I will say that in the way that he has described it, other places like his bio for the Sloan conference, the sports analytics Sloan conference that he spoke at, and in like previous interviews, he describes it as being able to open up access, impact lives by opening up access to cars for people. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree that at its core, it is a process that, like I said, it gives people a ladder out of where they are. Functionally, I'm not sure that it has operated that way, and I would say that many of the fine states in our union would agree that maybe wasn't the interest within which way they practice their business. But I would say, painting. You are right to call me out on painting too broadly here. In general, these are not. Yeah.
But yes, however, someone who got a loan at 28%, who couldn't make their payments and was living in their car when someone was sent to repossess it, probably doesn't feel like opportunities were really truly opened up for them.
Yeah,
and that's not a hypothetical. That was a case in the story.
Yeah, and it happened to one of our neighbors here in Oregon, right? Like these are the real people impacted by it, which I think is maybe the thing that strikes a chord with me. Shifting gears
and
a little bit.
I should say real quick that company, that was actually a different company called Exeter Finance. This is not all just Santander stuff in the past. After he left that company, he continued to invest in subprime loan companies, including a company called Exeter Finance that has been drawn scrutiny for doing pretty much all of the same things Santander is doing, and is actually run by a lot of Santander executives. He bought a stake in the company. He, as recently as 2022, was on its board of directors. And that company, we learned in the course of reporting, also is under investigation by Oregon and 42 states currently. So this isn't all just history. There are some things that are like ongoing.
Right. The 2022 within the timeline is after he purchased the Hurricanes. He became a majority owner in 2018, an outright owner in either 22 or 23. So like this is like into his, investing in sports, post pickleball, post Top Golf. This is like it remains part of his portfolio as he continues to sort of build his wealth. I don't know. Part of me thinks if you look closely at anyone who's made a bunch of money in our country, that you'll be like, oh, you're not going to feel like you're going to be like, oh, you kind of stepped on some people along the way. So I don't know. I don't necessarily think Tom Dundon is like evil or bad or anything, but I feel like it doesn't make it. I don't know. From my individual perspective, as a sort of as a partial observer, I'm like, well, that's not like the dude I necessarily want to root for. But I also don't think there was someone who was going to buy the Portland Trailblazers who I'd be like, yes, cool. We finally got a cool one. I feel like it'd be the same thing. It's like there's going to be something that seems unsavory once you have this type of wealth, because it is a very, very exclusive club being able to purchase an NBA team.
Yeah, and you'd asked like how we got into this reporting, and it was basically like we wanted to keep, we did those early stories like looking at stuff, and nobody really seemed to be looking at like, well, how did he originally make his wealth? Like, what can we learn about him through that? And so we started digging more into that, and I was mostly interested in not just like the subprime aspect of it, but the fact that there were these investigations, that Oregon itself was actually part of these investigations, and it wasn't to paint someone as, like you said, like as evil or to say like that you shouldn't be, if you're a basketball fan or a Blazers fan, that you shouldn't be like rooting for the team. Or it was just like, this is someone who's going to be controlling a pretty iconic piece of Oregon, who's very likely going to be involved in a public partnership, like a public money for an arena, and just like people should be, I think, clear-eyed going into that, and clear-eyed about who runs the team and all of that. So, and just that we were spending a lot of time thinking about like, what does this guy's past mean for the Blazers' future? And we were, I think, all collectively like kind of had a blind spot about a big piece of that past. So.
Yeah, and now we don't, thanks to wonderful reporting at Oregon Public Broadcasting. Again, linked in the episode description for this episode. Before I get out of here, let's end with some positive basketball stuff. What's your season starts in 15 days? 16. I don't know when this is going out. The season starts in 2 weeks. What's the number one thing you're excited about the Portland Trailblazers when you do get a moment to stop worrying about the news and all of the things and like working incredibly hard at keeping people informed? What is the thing that excites you about the Trailblazers?
They play hard as hell, and they play defense, and they just have a lot of guys that I'm eager to see what happens with them. Like, they have a lot of guys that's like, well, if that happens, okay. We were talking off mic before about Shaedon Sharpe, and I just think he's like, when he puts together, it just looks a little bit different, and he looks like one of those players that is pretty transcendent, and it's just fun to watch guys to see if they can put it together.
I also feel like this is one of the first seasons in the last handful that you can be like legitimately just sort of like fully optimistic and hopeful, because it doesn't feel like there's no anxiety that Damian Lillard's going to leave if something goes wrong. It's like we have to do it or Dame's going to leave, or just like a feeling like, well, they don't care about winning, so why should I type of thing. Like I feel like this is the first time in maybe 5 years since like the that like weird post-COVID season with the last year of the Stotts era, where it was like you can just be like genuinely excited about what's to come. It feels like there's like you can say like, hey, the games are going to happen and it's going to be fun to watch them, and obviously your expectations, I think people's are all over the map, but I think this is like a year where you can let yourself hope, and I'm not sure that has been true in the past.
Well said. Yeah, for sure.
And I would say if you follow the news like Tony does, being hopeful about stuff is really, really valuable. Tony, thanks so much for all you do. Where can folks find your work if they're looking for it?
OPB.org. We also have a partnership with, this piece was done with ProPublica. I kind of have a dual role with OPB and ProPublica, so we put out a lot of stuff together, but OPB.org.
Yeah, check it out. Oregon Public Broadcasting, they're doing great work, and you learn more about the citizens of Oregon because of it. Tony, thanks so much for your time. Dear listeners, come back for more shows the rest of the week. The Blazers are playing preseason games, and we'll got you covered for everything you need right here on the program. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.